My name is Gary, and I hope you are all having a fantastic day or evening wherever you are. In today's story, OB found out his wife cheated on him after their daughter confessed she saw OP's wife kiss another man. Then months later, karma happened and his wife got into a terrible car accident and lost both of her legs. Now, let's get into today's story. Not sure if this is the right place to post this, since my situation is very different from others, but I am desperate. My wife and I have been together for 25 years, but married for 19. We are high school sweethearts and have two amazing kids, a daughter and a son. I was honestly under the impression that we had a solid marriage, that our relationship wouldn't be like our friends and colleagues, and we'd actually stand the test of time. Now, I see how spectacularly naive and wrong I was. My wife has been a stay-at-home mom for most of our adult lives, something we both agreed on. But after our kids went to college, she began feeling restless, emptiness syndrome, I guess. She would tell me she was feeling unfulfilled and felt like she had lost sense of who she was. I tried recommending hobbies we could do together, places we could visit, or even adopting puppies, if that would help. And at first, she was all for it, but soon began saying she wanted to feel like she was contributing and not simply coasting through life. I understood and was willing to support her. She never liked sitting still, so I kind of expected it. She complained to a few friends, and one of them actually managed to get her an interview at a real estate firm. She used to work in one before having the kids, and I was just as excited as she was when she accepted. In the beginning, things were going great, but after the first year, I noticed some changes. She started going to drink-ups with coworkers, began texting a lot more than usual when at home, and at odd hours at night. She even started wearing a particular type of perfume, and would wear more suggestive clothing, nothing too revealing or slutty, but clothing that complemented her body figure a lot more than usual. But what made me suspicious was when I accidentally saw a message from a male coworker on her phone. I wasn't snooping, which seemed to be highly inappropriate and flirtatious. I asked about it, and I could tell she was slightly shaken, but assured me he was simply a friend, and she would talk to him about his inappropriate messages. Me, not wanting to be the paranoid, jealous, and controlling husband, chose to believe her and let it go. Oh, how I wish I didn't. Her behavior got more strange as time went on. She started mentioning how she wanted to be more spontaneous with life, and even picked up smoking weed. I made jokes about how she seemed to be living the same college lifestyle as our kids, and suggested she slow down. But she dropped an absolute boom when she mentioned in a drunken state, after another night of going out, that maybe I'd dim her lights and hold her back. I was completely blindsided by this, and really believed I was messing up somehow, so I tried to do everything to improve the marriage, even booked counseling, but it went nowhere. Then out of the blue, that strange behavior stopped. My wife apologized for the way she had acted. She said it was like she forgot who she was, but realized what she had at home, and knew she didn't want to lose it. She resigned from her job, and we began marriage counseling. It was tough initially, but things improved immensely, and for 2 years our marriage was better than ever. She was more attentive. She initiated intimacy more, and would shower me with affection. The only problem is that her relationship with our daughter seemed to be in a nosedive. I would question my wife about it, but she would tell me it was a growing phase, or a woman thing, and once again, I would take her word for it. Funny thing is, during this period, my relationship with my daughter improved. She would call a lot more, meet me for coffee or lunch, often during the week, and even bought me gifts, t-shirts and stuff. I always told her it wasn't necessary, but she insisted, and I could always tell she wanted to say something, but would hold her tongue. Tragedy struck one evening, as my wife was returning from doing groceries, and she was hit by a drunk driver. She unfortunately lost the use of her legs, and has been wheelchair bound ever since. Things got really bad, and she would make suggestions about me sleeping with other women, to which I obviously refused. I just choked it up to her depression and reminded her that I was here to stay because I loved her more than our situation. This actually made her cry and asked me why I was so good to her, or what did she do to deserve me. Again, I choked it up to depression and just tried to help her as best I can. Sometime later, we went for our medical checkups. The doctor sat us down to inform us that they had found a mass in my wife's throat. It was of an unusual size, and because it may be cancerous, they have to do a biopsy. My first reaction was shock, whereas my wife was just blank at first, and then she started laughing. It started small, then became hysterical, as she began mumbling that this was her punishment. We managed to calm her down, but she requested that before the biopsy, we could do a family dinner. I of course agreed, and we had our kids and immediate family over. I made a speech about how my wife was the light of my life, and how we get through this, but at the end of my speech, I noticed my daughter was rather uncomfortable. I thought that maybe it was because of what was going on that made her feel that way. The next evening, my daughter phoned me drunk, begging me not to hate her. At first, I was confused, but reassured her that I would never hate her, because she is my little girl, and I will always love her. At those words, she goes on to tell me how she caught her mother cheating on me with a man she had never seen before. It was during her time at the real estate firm. My daughter had gone on a road trip with some friends and decided to pass by a dinner place they don't normally frequent to get a bite, and that's where she saw her mother lip-lock with a man that looked nothing like me. Apparently, this was why their relationship deteriorated and ours improved. I confronted my wife, and to her credit, she didn't deny it. Through tears, she confirmed it was the coworker from the messages, and says it was the dumbest thing she has ever done. She said he was always coming on to her, and eventually wore down her walls. She tells me getting caught by our daughter made her realize the gravity of what she was doing. She wanted to take it to the grave, because she never wanted to hurt me, and was too much of a coward to confess. So she begged our child not to tell me. I am absolutely shattered at the revelation, and don't know what to do. I now question every aspect of our relationship, and wonder where I went wrong. She tells me I was a good husband, and that none of this is on me. The problem is, since that time, I haven't been loving towards her. I still take care of her, but it's more like a nurse does with a patient, rather than a husband to his wife. If I leave her, she will be completely stranded. She is dependent of me, both financially and emotionally, and it seems immensely unfair. Sorry if it seems all over the place, but I am a mess right now. Update. Wow. Had no idea so many people were willing to help, both on the post and in the inbox. It really helps to know we are not alone. I did something I am not proud of. My wife has always been on my case to experience my true feelings and thoughts about her, no matter how ugly or cruel they may be. Not long after my first post, in the afternoon, as I prepared lunch for her like I always do, and just when I was about to leave her to her meal, she suddenly grabbed my hand and once again begged me to say something to her. Anything, because it was killing her the way I've been treating her since our discovery day. At those words, I just exploded. A lot came out of me. I told her that to me she was perfection, but since this happened, she has become used in my eyes. I told her that the very sound of her voice used to make me want to give her the world, but now simply being around her makes me want to run and never look back. I told her that now she is like a dead weight around my neck that will never leave because it needs me to survive. I explained that through all this, she is still somehow the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing I think about when I go to sleep. But those thoughts are accompanied by a pain I never knew existed, and it makes me absolutely miserable because somehow I still need her. I still want to hold her in my arms, But each time I touch her, I have mental movies of her with another man. But what eats at me the most is the fact that she dragged our daughter into this. She put our baby girl in an impossible position and expected life to go on like nothing happened. I pointed out that even despite her current circumstances, her relationship with our daughter has hardly changed, and that is the fruit of her actions. My wife just sobbed softly through it all, and at the end, she simply said she deserved all that was coming her way. She said she tried her hardest to atone the disgusting decision she made during that time, and has never stopped seeking forgiveness from our daughter. She explains that seeing me in this state makes her feel like a murderer, and she will do absolutely anything to help me heal and recover from this. She also added that she wanted me to know that even if I never forgive her and end up divorcing her, she has and always will love only me, that she doesn't regret our life and marriage because it is more than she could have ever asked for. Apparently, she can hardly look herself in the mirror because of who is looking back at her, and she never wanted to be that person. I can see she clearly hates herself for what she did, but I am torn about all this. I never knew it was possible to absolutely love someone and hate them at the same time. I have decided to book therapy for me and my wife because I have a lot I want to say to her, but I'm afraid I'll go too far, so speaking in a controlled environment will be best. I also have this overwhelming urge to speak with the man she was involved with. It may be useless after many years, but I feel like I need to for my own sanity's sake. I want to know who is the man that had the audacity to actually come between a husband and his wife. I believe I will ask for his information during the therapy session. Once again, thank you all so much. Wow, what a crazy story. OP, here are my thoughts on the situation. I understand it's tragic to you that she got into a terrible car accident, but that doesn't take away from the fact that she cheated on you. And to make matters even worse, you had to find out from your daughter about it. You should not feel obligated in any way to help your wife out just because of what happened to her. From an outsider's perspective, what happened to her was karma's way of serving justice. She ultimately will now have to pay the consequences for the rest of her life for being with another man. As far as your daughter goes, continue to restore your relationship with her. The fact that your daughter had to get drunk to tell you what happened means she must have been feeling a ton of guilt about the situation, knowing that she has to explain to her dad that her mother isn't who they think she is. Continue to take time to heal over the situation and remember not to let what happened to your wife be a distraction from what she did. Now, let's get into the comments to see what they had to say about the situation. The Mockingbird said, "You didn't mess up. You were honest and finally opened up about the affair and her betrayal. You shouldn't feel bad for feeling the way you do. If you plan to reconcile or attempt to do so, then you'll need to get used to doing this because it'll need to be done. Getting a therapist to play mediator is a good idea. Your wife needs to stop the pity party and start working on herself. Maybe she does hate herself for what she's done to you and your daughter, but moping around while doing nothing to improve her situation will accomplish nothing. She needs to get herself into therapy and start putting in the work to regain your lost trust and work on fixing her relationship with your kid. Even if you end up divorcing, she should still make an effort to change and regain her daughter's trust and respect. I think I made my stance clear on your last post. I firmly believe anyone selfish enough to cheat and emotionally blackmail their kid is not someone worthy of forgiveness nor trust. But then again, I've never personally been married nor have I raised a kid. I'll respect whatever choice you make in regards to your marriage, and hope you don't stick around due to some perceived obligation. Thanks for taking your time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. Take care. Story. Before my wife, 32, and I, 35, got married, when we were in our 20s, she had trouble cutting ties with a long-distance boyfriend she dated for 4 years. She never told me where he lived, but she did tell me he lived 5 hours away. During our dating phase, I told her to choose who she wanted to build a life with. I left her alone for a few days, and she showed up at my house, appearing cleansed and pure of heart. She said goodbye to him, for real, and blocked him on all platforms. She was ready to take this next step into adulthood and responsibility by committing herself to me. I was pleased, but even after she did this, I still waited 2 years before proposing. A little before our wedding, she got kinda antsy, but she disguised it as healthy anticipation. After we were married, she seemed much more at ease, like she finally moved on and was settling into her new life. A whole year after we were married, she started friendships and daily communication with her coworkers. Our marriage was wonderful for years, but I didn't know that for much of the time, she was talking to her ex again. Another thing I should have looked into a little more was how my wife begged me for money. I didn't know it, but she was paying some of AP's bills and buying him things. Our utility bills were barely paid down enough to avoid shutting off. I checked her phone one morning when she forgot it on the way to work. She came back for it, but by then, I saw and copied all I needed to. I scrolled back far enough on their messages to find where she tried to keep it strictly friends. She said she missed him so much and thought about him every day. She couldn't resist a little bit of harmless communication. It started as her just wanting to know what he did each day, and then how his dating life was going. They gradually became more and more flirty, and throughout all their messages, she never once mentioned she was married. I wanted to throw up. She was trying to stay strictly friends with an ex-boyfriend, but wouldn't tell him about me, and failed to tell me about her friendship with him. In the most recent texts, she said she needed to see him again, and started talking about having reunion sex. He was thrilled. I worked up the nerve to tell her in her face that we were over, and she needed to get out, but before I could say it, she started telling me a story. It was a giant lie about an upcoming work trip in Altoona. I swallowed all the courage and confrontation. I was prepared to dish out, and pretended to support her. I knew she was going to visit AP, but the time she was gone would be the perfect time to change the locks, get out her stuff, and file for divorce, without her being around to freak out. Little did I know that karma wasn't done with her yet. I kissed her goodbye, and she left for 3 days. On the 4th day, I anticipated the breakup call I was going to make, informing her that I knew everything had proof, filed for divorce, and if she tried to come back on my property, the cops would be called. Before I could dial her number, she called me. She said she was stuck on the side of the highway, 3 hours from our house, and way off course from where she told me she was going for her work trip. This was rich. I pretended to be concerned and confused about her location, and she couldn't make up anything believable. She just said she was misinformed when she told me where the conference was going to be. I played with her nervous emotions a little more before telling her I knew she was a cheating skake, and I had all the proof I needed from her cell phone. She sucked in air so hard, I thought she would pull the phone in. Just like that, her world became big and scary. She was sitting alone on the side of the highway before she could complete her cheating scheme, and now she had to face the reality that she didn't have a home to return to. I told her I only let her go on the trip without telling her I knew the truth, so I got the chance to file for divorce and get a leg up on dumping her. She was terrified and didn't know what to say. I told her if she tried bugging me or starting rumors, I'd share what she'd done with the whole town. So I hung up on her, and she texted me a few times, begging me to let her come back to get her stuff and maybe let us talk this out. Since I didn't reply, she called AP. He did come to rescue her, but she lied to him too about where she lived. She told him she was living with a roommate right around the area where she broke down on the highway, so he asked why she couldn't get her to help. My wife had a meltdown and told him she was actually married, and now about to be divorced because I found out about them. I imagine he was shocked and frustrated, but he allowed her to live with him for 5 months. By that time, he had already cheated on her, and when he realized not even that would make her go, he told her she was a mistake and needed to leave. Of course, even without my help, her family and friends found out we divorced. She was gone for 5 months without saying goodbye to anyone. I think she ended up finding some desperate person looking for a roommate because they couldn't afford the rent on their trailer. She had to pick somewhere close because she never got her car fully repaired after AP's rescue. I don't know where she's going in life, but I've remained hopeful and grateful and found lots of support from people I least expected. Even my ex's parents expressed their apologies and sent me nice things in the mail. Wow, OP, you remained focused and knew right away you needed to separate from this woman. Letting someone live with you after discovering their infidelity is a huge mistake. It's lucky that your wife made up a lie right when you needed the opportunity to leave her. I think karma was already in effect as a positive result for you and undesirable consequences for her. She proved she wasn't ready to let go of her ex and was too immature for marriage. There are lots of people out there who should not be trying to date anyone because they haven't grown up themselves. Some people have no idea who they even are before they try to start molding to another person. It's impossible to know who you should be with if you don't know what makes you tick. I think if your wife would have taken the time to be independent and decide the course of her life, she wouldn't have been so uncertain. Thank you for sharing your story. You handled this very well. Now let's get into our second story for today. I always thought it was a good thing that I, 29, let my wife, 25, befriend guys. I trusted her, and she always let me check her phone whenever I wanted. Because of that, I didn't check it at all, really. I knew she was friends with a guy we'll call AP. She never told me she was going out with him specifically. She just said friends. A lot of nights, I'd go with her and see her interact with AP, among other friends. It looked natural and guilt-free. Even though the guy was an obnoxious idiot, they didn't look nervous or flirtatious or anything. Now I know that on nights I didn't go with her, she was seeing him alone. I never would have thought my nice, sweet, charismatic wife would be romantically interested in this butthole. Most nights, when we were out with him and other friends, he wouldn't pay for himself. He never offered to treat the group to drinks, even though the rest of us did it every once in a while. I was starting to see him as the least desirable of all my wife's friends. That's why it was so much worse when I arrived home one day to find him walking out of my house with my wife. I blew up on him, asking why he was here. He started stammering and acting like the idiot he always was. My wife figured the best way to handle it was to pretend he was only there to casually hang out and play pool. She didn't expect me to leave them both standing there and go check downstairs for evidence. She followed right behind me through the house, and as I got closer to the basement, she started pulling on my shirt. I found her clothes on the pool table, along with a towel laid down to keep the table clean. I kicked her out. I didn't wait, debate, argue, or think twice about it. The evidence was there. She cried and tried to negotiate an arrangement so that she could keep sleeping in the house each night. I told her no repeatedly until she took some of her stuff and left for stupid AP's house. As I grieved and contacted my mom and family for support, fate wanted to give me one more tragedy to deal with. 1 week later, my mom passed away. It was a really terrible time for me, but even during this time, I didn't consider reaching out to my ex. I only communicated with family and really close friends. They helped me plan her funeral, and when the day came, the last people I would have expected to see there were my wife or her AP. Yet, there they were, walking over to me like they were the greatest thing to ever happen. I couldn't believe my wife's innocent and happy demeanor, like she had no idea her being there would bother me. On the other hand, I could totally understand AP's cocky expression. I was sure the expression on my face told them they weren't welcome, but AP actually had the nerve to mock me at my mother's funeral. He said my mom wasn't the only thing I'd lost this week. I saw red spreading in from the corners of my vision, and everything got a little blurry. I remember feeling my arm wind up on its own just before the knockout punch. He landed flat on the ground, and everyone gasped. I took the opportunity to announce my wife's affair and the reason for our divorce. Nobody wasted any time in throwing insults at her and demanding that she leave. When she hesitated to leave, people started telling her to shoo and waving their scarves or coats at her like an animal. I walked away and was supported physically and emotionally by friends and family for the rest of the day. She started screaming in frustration for AP to wake up and come with her. He finally did, and they were led away by security. From then on, my wife's social life was over. Everyone she knew thought she was gross and scandalous. Idiotic AP started believing she would cheat on him, so he left her. Maybe he got a little wiser because of all this. After the divorce was final, my ex was admitted to a mental institution to try to get a handle on her extreme depression and remorse. She felt like she didn't know who she was, and she apologized to me at least once a month. It was hard for her to forgive herself, but I just don't understand how she couldn't see it was wrong to begin with. OP, I am glad you had your family and friends for support over the loss of your mom, and then also your wife. It's completely unfair that you had to face the truth of her infidelity at a time when people most rely on their spouses for support. It's surprising to me that she had the nerve or stupidity to show up to the funeral with AP. That's probably the worst thing she could have done. And then AP completely disrespects and insults you. You had every right to react the way you did. He way overstepped the boundaries of respect and basic human decency. You did the right thing by investigating what she told you and following through with kicking her out. I'm glad her actions provided her with consequences, and even the idiotic AP left her. Hopefully, she gets the opportunity to heal and improve her life, thereby sparing others heartbreak. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care. In this story, you see a man who acts accordingly. Some may say he was a simp, but not every man will have the get the fuck out mentality right away when dealing with their wives cheating on them. Kills me sometimes when men crucify other men on this platform because they don't walk away fast enough. I will say this, and I will always say this: we are not built the same mentally. People will act differently in certain situations that includes relationships, especially if you have been with someone for a long time. Sometimes it's just not that easy to walk away initially. Now let's get into the story. It has been 6 years since my wife and I tied the knot, and we have 2 girls, both of whom are from my wife's prior relationship. Our bond wasn't bad. On the weekends, we would do stuff with the girls, going to the movie theater, having dinner, and so on. I was delighted to be their stepdad, and we'd always have a great time. Everything started to fall apart about 10 months ago when my wife went out with her friends for a night. On the following day, when she returned, it was clear that something had upset her. When I inquired about what was bothering her, she avoided my question and said she was exhausted from the previous evening. However, I could sense that something was wrong. I didn't push her to tell me what was wrong. She said she was exhausted, so I accepted it. In the following days, I observed that she was frequently on her cell phone, even during supper. When I asked her why she was texting so much lately, she told me she was in a chat room conversing with her gal pals about the last girls' night out they had and getting ready for another one. It didn't even register to me then. She was at it again, endlessly messaging her pals as usual. In retrospect, I now understand that she had something going on with them that she was trying to keep from me. I'm starting to get irritated with my wife, as she always seems to be talking about another night out with her girlfriends, even though she already had one a few weeks ago. She works as a consultant for a big firm, which leaves her under a lot of pressure. So, I usually let her have a night out every now and then to relax. But two in such a short space of time, I'm not happy about it. That's the worst part of her group of friends. All of them are still single, and she's the only married one. I'm not happy about this because it means the only person who's in danger of losing something is her, while the other women can do whatever they want without consequence. I'm not trying to be a dictator in my marriage, but I also don't want it to be a situation where my wife is unfaithful. Once again, she managed to do another girls' night out. I was infuriated when I warned her the following day to be cautious and to make sure she didn't let her single friends lead her astray and harm her marriage. She gave me a befuddled stare, but didn't respond. After a long day at work, I dropped by my parents' place and vented to them about my annoyance with my wife going on these regular girls' night out events. I angrily informed my mom that all the acquaintances she socializes with are unattached and have no particular responsibilities to bear. My mom gave me a stern look and said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with a girls' night out, but it's not a good idea to have it with only unmarried women." She warned me my wife was taking this a bit far, and then my dad added that if he were me, he would put his foot down and tell my wife to knock this off. My dad was angry that she continues to go out partying without me and said it was a huge issue for him and a bit suspicious at the same time. After that, my mother chimed in again, noting that she had gone on a girls' night out with her friends only 3 times since tying the knot with my father, nearly 37 years ago. My mom's friends were all married, and she indicated that they had to be home before midnight, and they were never on any later than that. As I traveled back home, I mulled over their words and realized they had a point. I had to take decisive action to stop the situation before it got out of control. When I arrived home, I mentioned the issue with my wife, who became livid and accused me of being a dictator and not having faith in her. I attempted to make it clear to her that I wasn't attempting to control her. I merely wanted her to be cautious out of my love for her. She wouldn't even listen and stormed off to bed in a fit of rage. The following day, she completely skipped out on coming home from work to go to her third girls' night out without informing me. I was livid that I wasn't made aware of her plans. I was livid that my wife didn't get back till after 2 in the morning, so I just sat there silently fuming. When she stepped into the bedroom, I faked being asleep. I had to figure out why she was ditching her family and going out with her friends. The following morning, while driving to the office, I phoned up a good friend of mine and asked him if he still had the contact details of the private investigator he previously utilized for that workman's comp scam. My buddy had an employee who was attempting to obtain workers' compensation due to an alleged incident that took place at the job. This worker was moaning about how he couldn't come to work anymore. In response, my friend hired a private investigator, and it was revealed that the individual wasn't hurt at all. He was actually playing golf, playing basketball, and taking part in a flag football league. Needless to say, he immediately withdrew his claim for workman's comp. My buddy passed on the contact details of the detective he used, and then he asked me if there was a problem. I told him I wasn't sure, and I implied that I suspected my wife was up to something she shouldn't be. I said she had been going out and attending these girls' nights out bashes. I was fuming when my buddy inquired why I suspected my wife was unfaithful. I filled him in on the 3 occasions she went out and stayed out late, coming back reeking of booze. I mentioned to him that when I brought up the topic to her, she became mad and really nasty, and then he said to me, "Get your evidence first before anything." I phoned the private investigator and made arrangements to see him after work. When I saw the private detective asked me what I wanted him to do. I informed him that he was to keep tabs on my wife when she was supposedly going out with her friends on these so-called girls' night. The detective informed me of the hourly rate of $125, to which I angrily responded that I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted to find out what my wife was up to. I provided the detective with a photo of my wife, informing him regarding the type of car she drove, her place of employment, and her work hours. The private detective informed me he was going to begin tailing my wife the following day. I maintained my composure while I waited 3 days for the private investigator to contact me and inform me of my wife's activities. Eventually, he did phone me. The private detective asked me to meet him right after work, and he had some video footage to show me. When I got there, he played me a video of my wife departing work wearing an outfit that was different than the one she had on when she left for work that day. She changed her clothes at work. He tracked her to a bar where he saw her sitting at a table with a group of females who were her friends. They stayed for approximately 2 hours before leaving, so he trailed them to a home located about 25 minutes away from the bar. He noticed that a man opened the door for them and they all went inside. The private detective was wearing dark clothing. He mentioned to me that at night it allows him to blend in when he's conducting surveillance. He crept up to a window a few feet away and observed all the women were dancing, moving suggestively with a number of men, and my wife was in the corner embracing a man. He was clasping her butt and she was kissing him. He then gave me a glance and said, "I believe you have sufficient footage to accomplish what you are aiming for," and gave me a flash drive. He also stated that he would keep a copy for safekeeping. After speaking with the private investigator, I returned to my house in tears. It was unfathomable to me that my partner of 9 years had betrayed me and was still continuing her infidelity. I had a burning desire to confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to show her the video. The morning after, I departed for work without saying a word to my wife, who then sent me a message while I was on my way there, demanding an explanation as to why I didn't say anything to her when I left. I just did not reply to her message. When I arrived at my job, I took the initiative to phone a few divorce attorneys to find out what divorce had in store for me. I started searching for a new place to stay, as I was aware that it was impossible to remain in the same house as my wife. Although it's hard to be apart from the girls, their mother made this decision. I was completely crushed. Everything in my life had been completely disrupted and I had no idea how to put it back together. The only viable option was to end our marriage. I had no intention of attempting to patch things up. If she wishes to be single, then she can have it. I had to be careful in my planning as I didn't want the girls to be unaccompanied, while their mother left for her girls' night. As I'm aware, Michigan is a no-fault state, so I presumed that filing for divorce should be relatively straightforward. When I got back to my house that evening, my spouse was in the den with as I entered. She asked me how my day had been and the girls grinned at me saying, "Hello, Dad." I felt like bursting into tears, but I had to maintain my composure. After a few hours had passed, everyone was getting ready to call it a night. My wife took the girls to their beds and then came back down to ask me if I was interested in watching a movie with her. My response was a polite, "No, I don't think so." Then she said she was turning in for the night. I held off on going upstairs and gathering my belongings until she had drifted off to sleep. I had nowhere else to go, so I stopped by my parents' house. It was already late, so my dad was understandably concerned and asked if I was all right. I responded that I had something to show him. We took a seat at the dining room table and I played the video my private investigator had put together. I let my dad view the evidence the investigator had gathered, and he was stunned. I showed my mom as well. Both of my parents were stunned. I informed them that I was leaving and getting a divorce, but they did not attempt to dissuade me. It was undoubtedly upsetting for them, yet it was out of their power to do anything about it. My wife had cheated on me, don't know how many times, but I was not staying in this marriage. I didn't go back to the house, I stayed at my parents'. The following morning, I got out of bed and messaged my supervisor that I was going to be showing up late to work. I told him everything. He did not have any objections to me coming in late. After conversing with my supervisor, I noticed that my wife had sent me a large number of texts asking where I was and why I had gone the previous night. I didn't answer any of them. After locating a lawyer, I initiated the divorce proceedings due to infidelity and left the residence. When I knew my wife wouldn't be home, I left a note on the counter informing her that I filed for divorce and if she needed me, I would be at my parents'. After I finished my job for the day, I headed to my parents' home and noticed my wife's car in my parents' driveway. When I walked in, I noticed my spouse at the kitchen table, sobbing. She questioned why I had filed for a divorce and I took out my phone slowly and showed her the video. I expressed that I didn't deserve this. I told her, "You were lying to me all this time, claiming to do girls' night, but you were cheating on me." After discussing the situation for a bit, we concluded that getting a divorce would be the best option. I informed her that I had no interest in the house since we were just renting it so she could have it. She has enough income to cover the expenses. At the divorce court hearing, it was civil. The judge allowed me a month to collect the remainder of my possessions. I was not demanding alimony from her. I was making more than her, and I was not obligated to pay child support since she was obtaining it from the we are both in our mid-30s and the girls are 10 and 9. It was a difficult situation for me as I had formed a deep bond with them and had been like a father to them. Even though I wasn't their biological dad, I was given an opportunity for a job in another state. So, I accepted it, changed my contact information, letting only my family and a small group of acquaintances have my updated information, and began a fresh start. It's been nearly 2 years since then, and I'm feeling much better. I'm now going out with someone new, and I'm in a much happier mental state. I have been informed by some of my friends that my ex-wife was inquiring about me, and even made an attempt to contact me on social media. Yet, I have no interest in conversing with her or having any contact with her. I'm thrilled that I chose to move on with my life, and I wish you can do the same if you are facing a similar situation. My name is Connor, and when I look back on my 15-year marriage to Mandy, I can hardly believe how blunt I was. We met when we were just 19, young and reckless. She was a waitress at a diner near my college campus. I was a freshman with big dreams, but little direction. We clicked right away over late-night cups of coffee and conversations about music and movies. Before we even really knew each other, we had jumped into marriage and started a family. Our first child, Jacob, came along when we were 21. We were just kids ourselves, trying to raise a baby in a cramped studio apartment while finishing school. Money was tight as we balanced part-time jobs and classes. Mandy's parents had disowned her for getting pregnant out of wedlock, so we had no family to turn to. I worked as a bartender and Mandy waitress at night, while our neighbor watched the baby. We argued a lot about how to make ends meet. Mandy wanted me to drop out and work full-time while she stayed home, but I was determined to finish my engineering degree. I thought we'd both have to work and make sacrifices if we were going to provide any kind of decent life for our son. Those years nearly tore us apart. If not for our love for Jacob, I don't know if we would have made it. By the time our daughter Wendy was born, we were 25. We had settled into an uneasy compromise. I had finally graduated and secured an entry-level job with a construction firm. Mandy continued waitressing part-time for the flexible hours and extra cash. We bought a small house in the country, thrilled to finally have space and a backyard for the kids. Those early years were filled with chaos but also joy. I worked long hours as a junior site manager, often leaving before dawn for faraway construction sites. I cherished the weekends, spending sunny Saturdays in the yard, kicking a ball with Jacob and pushing Wendy on the swing set. On Sundays, we would go to the zoo or children's museum, making memories as a family. When I got home from work, I was exhausted. Mandy would have dinner ready, but sometimes I would go straight to bed afterwards, weary from being on my feet all day, yelling at contractors and troubleshooting problems on the work site. Mandy started hinting that she wanted to go back to school for interior design, but we couldn't afford full-time daycare. I told her to wait a few more years until the kids were both in school. I thought we were making it work. The kids were happy and healthy, and Mandy and I had settled into a comfortable routine. Well, at least that's the way it looked. Looking back now, I can see the signs were there all along. When the kids reached school age and Mandy started taking some classes, she began coming home later and later. She said it was group assignments, but I would call the school and no one had heard of any night classes. When I asked to see her syllabus, she got defensive and accused me of being controlling. Mandy started going out more too, claiming it was just mom's nights for wine and venting. Sometimes she didn't stumble home until midnight or later. When I complained that she needed to be up to get the kids on the school bus, she accused me of smothering her. I backed off, wanting to be supportive and not be the bad guy. I figured she was bored from working all the time or watching the kids when she was off work and needed to blow off some steam now and then. As the kids were getting older, the cracks in our marriage were becoming canyons. Mandy was still taking random night classes, but didn't seem interested in pursuing interior design anymore. We rarely spent time together, and when we did, we ended up arguing about money or childcare logistics. She was hanging out with single gal pals, going to clubs, and coming back reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. I was smoking too, picking up the habit from the endless stress of job site emergencies. We slept in separate rooms by then, and avoided each other as much as possible. I buried myself in work, thinking if I could just make foreman, then supervisor, it would smooth things over. Mandy continued going out more and more, not coming home until early morning some nights. I tried to shield the kids from it as best I could, but I know Jacob and Wendy sensed the tension simmering below the surface. Finally, one night, it all exploded. Mandy didn't come home at all. I sat up until the sun crept in, fury and dread churning in my gut. Around 5 a.m., she finally rolled in, reeking of alcohol and sweat, smeared makeup all over her face. When I demanded to know where she'd been, she burst out laughing. I was with my lover, Rick. We've been hooking up for months. You're such an idiot, Connor. This marriage is a joke. Her words hit me like a sucker punch as she rambled on about her boyfriend, Rick, how they'd been meeting for secret hookups in cheap motels, how he satisfied her in ways I never could. I felt sick. I wanted to scream and rage to demand answers, but the kids were asleep upstairs. So, I quietly told Mandy to pack a bag and get the fuck out. She left, still ranting and raving, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I sat stunned in the armchair. How could I have been so blind? The signs were all there, but I had ignored them, burying myself in work and the comfortable fiction of domestic life. I had lived a lot for years, right under my own roof. I didn't tell the kids right away. I let them get through the school week, trying to act normal, but inside I was reeling. On Friday afternoon, I finally sat Wendy and Jacob down. I broke the news about why their mom left, told them that their mom was having an affair with another man, and I asked her to leave. Jacob, now 15, turned red with fury. He immediately blamed Mandy, calling her a selfish cheat. He said he never wanted to speak to her again. Wendy, at 11, was more upset. She cried while I held her, huge heaving sobs racking her slender frame. I didn't have any words that could make it better. All I could do was hug my kids close, while our little world crumbled around us. In the months after Mandy left, I tried to cling to stability for the kids. I made breakfast and dinner, checked homework, and held my tears and until I was alone. Jacob hardly reacted outwardly after that first day, sealing up his emotions, but I could tell he was broken-hearted. Wendy remained withdrawn and weepy. Whenever Mandy called, trying to explain herself or win the kids back, they refused to speak to her. I stopped answering her calls too. There was nothing left to say. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic after the bomb that had blown our family apart. Mandy tried every manipulation in the book, but it was too late. She blamed me, saying I had ignored her needs. She claimed I drove her into the arms of another man by being boring and unsupportive. At one point, she even tried to say our marriage failed because of lack of intimacy after the kids were born. She tried to turn Wendy and Jacob against me, telling them lies about how controlling I was. None of her gaslighting worked. Once I knew the truth, I saw her schemes for what they were: desperate ploys from a woman unwilling to take responsibility for her own destructive choices. In the courtroom, Mandy tried to blame me again for all her cheating and negligent behavior, but I had proof now in the form of emails and receipts from her secret hotel stays, credit card bills for restaurants and vacations she had taken with her lover. I presented the evidence calmly, though inside I shook with anger at the injustice of it all. Mandy broke down weeping and pleading, but it was far too late for any of that. In the end, the judge clearly saw her for what she was, an unfaithful wife, and absent mother. Jacob had chosen to stay with me rather than his mother, but I couldn't get primary custody of Wendy. She was only 11 at the time, and we went 50-50 custody. That painful chapter closed over a year ago. The kids and I have slowly begun to heal. Jacob is still closed off emotionally and wants little to do with his mother. Their relationship may always be strained. Wendy, though, has found more acceptance. Once the initial shock and hurt faded, she realized she still needed her mom in her life on some level. They would occasionally go for a meal or shopping trip. I know Wendy's kindness will be a gift in mending the broken bond, and I will support her no matter what, just as I've supported both kids through this life-changing ordeal. As for me, the past year has been about rebuilding myself, my relationship with my kids, my sense of world. For over a decade, I believed one thing when the truth was something far more painful. Such a massive dissection can corrode your very foundation, but I've also found unexpected sources of hope and joy where I least expected it. Her name is Marlene. I met her 6 months ago on a new construction project for luxury condos downtown. Marlene is a real estate agent. She is sometimes hired to style and stage the model units. I was immediately struck by her quick mind and kind spirit, so different from the turmoil I'd become used to at home. We started spending our site-meeting coffee breaks together, chatting about life and work, then a drink after work turned into dinner. Before I knew it, we were spending every spare moment together. There was no lightning bolt moment of falling in love, just a steady warmth and rightness, like I had found a missing piece I didn't know was gone. Her presence soothed me, her laughter healed something. When I finally told the kids I had met someone, they were understandably weary. Their own mother had just ripped our family in two. How could they ever trust another woman entering our lives? But when they met Marlene, her gentle caring melted their doubts. She makes me feel alive again after years of just going through the motions. When we are together, I remember what a real partnership feels like. Knowing someone has your back, supports your dreams, wants to share the journey. I know we'll take it slow for the kids' sake, but I can picture a future with Marlene now. A chance to rebuild my life into something beautiful again. The path ahead has its challenges. I still have moments of grief and anger over Mandy's betrayal that catch me unprepared. My relationship with Jacob remains tentative. We are both wary of trusting too much again too soon, but rebuilding takes time, and all things grow stronger with care. What Mandy broke, Marlene and I commend. When I look back now on my failed marriage, part of me is sad for the naive boy I was who believed in happily ever after, but mostly I feel grateful. Grateful for second chances, grateful for my strong children who have stood by me through the hardest year of our lives, and grateful for Marlene, a woman whose love and light has lifted the shadows of the past. I don't know if I'll ever marry again. For now, I am focused on writing a new story one day at a time. It won't be perfect or predictable, but it will be real. My marriage to Mandy nearly broke me, but now my life is filled with hope once more. Hard-won wisdom as a way of illuminating your path, help you move forward. And while the future is uncertain, I look ahead with an open heart, determined to appreciate every moment. Well, in my opinion, the fact that she told him that she was with a lover, wow, blatant disrespect for the marriage and the kids. People don't ever put up with shit like that ever. If you do, it shows a sign of weakness, and you will be walked over all the time. Don't do it. Remember, don't ever let